Hey everybody, welcome to the Conversations in Groove podcast. I'm Benji Johnson and I'm going to be your host. You might ask yourself, what are Conversations in Groove? Heck, I don't know, but we're going to find out the whole season what they are. We're going to find out what your groove is and what some of my really cool friends' grooves are. Is it music? Is it TV and film? Do they act? Or do they just listen to records with a deep groove to them? Well, we're going to find out all season long. I got some really cool people coming up and some really big episodes coming up. So prepare yourself for the Conversations in Groove podcast right here live from Earthtones Recording Studio. Welcome to episode 3 of the Conversations in Groove podcast. And this week, or this episode, I shall say, my most awesome guest, and she's very gracious for setting aside her time to do this, is the one and only Miss Lucy Woodward, ladies and gentlemen. The one and only.
Oh, the crowd goes wild.
So how have you been, ma'am?
Oh, boy.
That's a heck of a question, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and in the beginning of the pandemic, I heard every podcast was like, so how are you doing? And everyone, it was like 20 minutes of COVID talk. Right. And so we're not going to do that because we're on the other end of it. And also it's really boring.
Totally boring.
So I'm doing well considering it's been a crazy year,
awesome.
But I'm actually good.
Well, I know that speaking of COVID, the crazy thing is that this will be a brief synopsis on my part, and I promise I won't talk long. We did a record in here. I recorded you and Charlie Hunter and Doug Belote, and this was a year ago, January, and that was, for me, the beginnings of any inklings of COVID. And I don't know if I'm sure you remember that because you guys were in the process of trying to reschedule or cancel this tour that you had in China. And it was only in China that we knew of at the time. And I remember the first day you guys came in, you were
so stressful.
Oh, it was crazy, right? And you guys were, I talked to Charlie about this on his episode. You guys were canceling in real time this tour, or trying to manage this tour in real time and figure out what to do. And I told him it was amazing to me to see that inner workings, because you guys are a very independent band as far as your bookings and as far as all your stuff. And it's not like you could call management and, just say, hey, take care of all this and let us know how it goes. It's like you guys were actively, managing and canceling this tour in real time. And when I think about the beginning of COVID myself, I think about that day that you guys were coming in here, and I could probably almost go to my calendar and mark it. Unfortunately, that's, it's not all I think about for that session, but when people have like COVID timelines about stuff, then that is mine. I could go to that and go like, that's the first that I would have had any sort of, that's the first that I would have had any sort of like benchmark as to when it technically started for me. And that was way earlier than most people, because we all kind of, went by the news here. And then you guys actually went and did dates after that in Europe, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that was about it was like the week of January 25th or January 26th. And we were about to go to China and Japan, like maybe 2 weeks later or something, or 3 weeks later, something like that. We were just deciding if we should cancel because China had canceled. We were also supposed to go to Japan. And it was just a lot of like, what if, and is it really going to go to Japan? And is this a bad idea? Will we get stuck there? We had already been hearing cases of people not getting out. So we had to really, it was such a night. It would have been my first time there with him. And it's such a big trip. And you kind of have to weigh out things and think about what is a pandemic in our life. We've only read about it in textbooks, so we don't know what that's going to be like. And the news was terrible. Anyway, so we all experienced our own thing. It's such a funny timeline that we all had. Like, my last catastrophe was 9/11, and you know exactly where you were that day. So we did go to Europe, and when we did a few countries, and we got to Italy for 4 dates. And after 2 dates, the last 2 dates were canceled, and we got shipped home. And that was the beginning of the next 80 dates being canceled.
Pretty unbelievable. It's crazy.
So there it is.
I know.
But in the meantime, we still finished this record. We were doing a record. We decided to not put it out last year because it just seemed like so much political stuff going on and cultural stuff going on. There was so much unrest in the US, and it just didn't feel right to put out this record. I felt like we're just a record. Who cares? There's so many bigger problems going on.
Exactly.
So we waited. Obviously many fires still have to be put out, but we are in the world, in the US, that's ongoing, but we will start releasing this record in the coming months.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we waited, to be honest.
Yeah, you guys were sort of you were like the first, you were probably the first record that was put on hiatus from the beginning of that thing for me. Because there were a lot of them. There was it's not like I cut a lot of records after the whole thing started, but I mean, you guys were one big record I was looking forward to coming out, and we were all on that timeline, and had that sort of general release date in mind. And but the crazy thing is, it wasn't like I was like pushing, like you said, there were so many other things going on. It wasn't like I was pushing for, hey, when is this record going to come out? Why aren't you releasing the record? I mean, it's like everybody obviously knew. And then there were so many I'd done right before then that basically had, even if they got released, like you said, it's in the scheme of things, it's just a record, and it's
just a record. We're just grains of sand, really, in a big picture, and there's so much going on, and I mean, so it's a humbling situation for all of us, really.
So moving forward, speaking about the record and not moving backwards, speaking about it. So let's talk about, we did a record in here a year ago last January, you, Charlie Hunter, and Doug Belote, and talk a little bit about what you, with all that time in between, talk to me a little bit about what you remember about that. It's so weird to go back in time when I listen to records that I've done 2 or 3 years, or I go back to the sessions, the Pro Tools sessions, and I listen to them. I can remember things, but I don't think I've ever cut a record and had it been this long, no matter what the issue is, but had it been this long for any kind of release date. So I ask you, I'm in here every day, so I can go like, oh yeah, it was a record amongst many that I did, and this is kind of what we did. What do you recall about, the whole vibe of that record and cutting it and doing it that you remember?
Well, Charlie and I had been, what was that? So that was 2020. Seems like 5 years ago. And we had been touring pretty much straight since 2018. So we had done so much on the road, and we would kind of make up songs and grooves and ideas in our long van rides until soundcheck. And we'd drive for 5-6 hours, whatever, sometimes less, sometimes more. And we would decide, let's try this song tonight. And we'd get to sound check and pick a key and pick a groove and then like play it that night. So that was how we rolled in our whole improv world, or not improv world. I mean, there's a lot of improv, but in the sense of how we sculpted who we are and what we do. I do my own thing. Charlie does his own thing, but together it was kind of a new thing. And so that was an adventure kind of every day on the road. So by the time we got to the studio, we knew maybe 90% of the tunes that we were going to do. And the last couple, we just sort of tried in the studio where we had, rehearsed a little bit and like, we haven't done this live yet, but let's just record it because it's funky and it's a great lyric and let's just do it. So, so there was a lot of experimenting in the studio, while there had been a lot of things that had been really hashed out on the road. So there was a nice balance where normally when I go make a record, well, I guess there's always, every record is a little bit of both. I've always been someone to make a record and then I go on the road and I perform the heck out of it for however long.
Right.
And that was what this, most of this record was like that, but there were a handful of songs that there was like not a lot of experience live. And I know as a singer, that's how I work things out, how I figure out how to sing things, how do I figure out if there's an audience reaction or what the buttery notes are, what the notes I need to not do. So I remember getting to experiment with some of those things in the studio. But it was coming there, Charlie's my bro and Doug, is my other brother. And we spent so much time on the road together. So it's like an old boot, an old boo. It's like two old boots, not saying they're old. We're like two old boots that we just throw on and just hit the road with. So that's why we're very comfortable with each other, obviously.
Oh, that's too
so
fun.
That's something different. Like going and making other studio records. It's like it might be fragmented. It might be pulling in people and you've played with them all or they're your friends, but I've never really like been on the road for 2 years and then go make a record. So It's really a different kind of thing for me. I think Charlie's done that a gazillion times, but I haven't.
You guys cut this so live, which was amazing to me to watch in the studio. We had you in a vocal booth, isolated, and you guys were cutting the whole thing. You were pretty much running it down live. And what I like was I think Doug maybe had a click track in his ear, but you guys didn't. So it really had there wasn't a lot of trickery or editing or anything.
No trickery, like Benji.
None.
No, I think that Doug maybe a couple of songs he started.
I call a click trickery. So a click in his ear
clickery.
wasn't a clickery.
Clickery.
So
I think a couple of songs because there's some songs that Charlie is a walking metronome. He taught me about how to try to attempt to be a walking metronome too. So it's some of those songs. There's such a slight like BPM difference. If it's 2 clicks too slow or 2 clicks too fast, it's like the pocket just feels different. So that's why it was like really good for us to just. Because we were doing these takes live. So we needed to make sure that we were in the pocket from the get-go. And of course, things could sway. We weren't really chopping things and editing. So of course, things could sway. But starting off to get that solid pocket, that was important. So that's like kind of the only reason we used click.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, too, with... I know one of the songs, and I couldn't tell you which one it is. If I pulled them up and listened, I could probably tell you. And I remember one of the songs, I had never had this happen before. One of the songs, Charlie had me take his whole track. His instrument goes to however many tracks, 2 or 3, with his bass doing one thing and his guitar doing the other thing. Take his whole track, and we slid it back. It was like 10 milliseconds. We slid it backwards in time. And it sat in the pocket.
I think it was, maybe I shouldn't say. I just don't remember either. And I don't want to say it because I think on one song I may have done that with my vocal also, and it just felt better. And it was a different song. So sometimes you just go like this, ching, or maybe one section of it, and it's like, ching.
Yeah.
And something just sits, and then you can only strive to practice, like if you go and perform it live or start getting that pocket into your head, and it's like a goal to sit that laid back, and it's like the tiniest smidgen.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
Can make a difference.
And I kind of and learning that, like watching that, to me, the one thing that you have to be to be able to even do a trick like that. Like for people who don't know, I'll just briefly explain. Like there's a software that I use called Pro Tools. There's a million of them, and you see these little squiggly wave looking things on the screen, and that's your audio recorded. So you can take any section of that, and you can move it around in time. You can move it forwards or backwards against, like I can move the guitar forwards or backwards and leave the drums where they're at. So we took Charlie's guitar and bass track and we moved it just ever so slightly, like 10 milliseconds backwards in time, the whole thing. And what's amazing is to be able to do that. That's not something I could do with everybody. To be able to do that, he had to have played the whole song so consistently in time that you don't hear any of that time shift. And that is where you realize that you're dealing with the big
walking
boys.
metronome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I realize as an engineer the level of musicianship that I'm working with when you guys are in here, when I can do something like that, or and that's the thing is working with that, and I pull these tracks up. They're very organic sounding. Everything is very live. Your vocals are very much, very much live takes. Live takes, but at the same time, it's not anything where we went in, and manipulated a lot of stuff with any parts of anything that you guys did. I mean, and it's
no. I mean, I think sometimes, I'm not. I remember the first time someone put auto-tune on my voice, like when I was doing demos for, I don't know, Britney Spears or something many moons ago. And I remember,
we'll have to get to that story.
Oh my God. Beginning of my career. And I remember I was doing demo and someone's like, I was singing pitchy and they put on auto-tune and I was like, what's that? And then at first I was like offended that they were using this thing. I can sing it again. I can sing it not pitchy. And they're like, no, it's cool because it was an effect also. So I've never really been afraid of Melodyne or auto-tune, because sometimes you sing something and the emotion is there, but the pitch might not be there.
Right.
And that's the live aspect of it. So yeah, you can leave it really pitchy and like wince every time you hear it, or the emotion is there. The emotion is more important to me than the pitch. So if sometimes an emotion is in a tone, that can't be duplicated sometimes again. So I don't really mind pitching a little note. I'm not going to act like I'm a perfect singer, like at all. So I don't mind it. That's the kind of little trickery that we did, if anything. But I think a lot of singers.
I don't know that we did it. I don't know that we did any of. I know that we edited takes, but
yeah, we comped. We did. I think how we did it was like we would make one. I think we probably sang the song down 3 times or so, and then we pick our basic rhythm track, whatever sounded the best.
Yep.
Sometimes I think a couple of songs we even did it just twice.
Yep.
And then I did some vocals, and then we comped them. And sometimes we used pieces of the live take, and sometimes I don't know. I like to get in there. I like to get in there and really focus on the vocal singing it sometimes after the fact, because I know what the spirit feels like.
Yeah, and once you know what the committed bed track that you're singing against is, it's a little easier to go, okay, now I know this is what we're keeping. This is the keep or take of the drums and the guitar, the drums and the bass or whatever. Yeah. And now I know what I have to work with. And you can go in and deliver it 2 or 3 different ways and kind of go, all right, now I can listen to it 2 or 3 different deliveries in this one section and figure out what I want to keep or use, or how this ends up being. Okay, so talking about this record, do you guys have a title for it yet?
Oh yeah, it's called "I'm a Stranger Here." And the album is "I'm a Stranger Here" because the first single, which was out in late April, is "Stranger Blues," which is a song by Elmore James. And the opening line is, "I'm a stranger here, and I just flown in your town." And it's kind of a cool lyric because we only sang that song maybe a couple times live, really, maybe 4 times live. And we sing that song on tour, and we go on tour, and we always feel like a stranger, yet we're always kind of warmly welcomed, yet we just blow through the town and then move on to the next town. So strangely, that fit our vibe.
Yeah.
And that's why we picked that song.
And it's such a funky song. Oh my God, it's so funky. It's ridiculous.
So funky. I know. Thank you.
It is. It's the whole record is. I mean, but that I know that song. If I that to me that song is like the epitome of that record. It's got that percolating funky thing. It's got that, you got some gravel in that
percolating funk. That is the key word.
It really, really is.
That is a good, I'm going to write that down, and I might have to create a hashtag with that one, because that's a percolating funk. Go ahead. Keep talking. Keep hashtagging.
You're welcome. You're welcome for that. Yeah. So yeah, totally percolating, and as Charlie would say, disgusting.
Disgusting.
Totally
disgusting.
Totally disgusting. And it you know, and that whole week it was just so funky. It was fun. So hopefully we can hopefully now that things are getting somewhat back to normal, we can do that again, or get you coming through town somehow. And I know, and the coolest part, not the coolest part, but one of the cool parts for me was on after you guys had finished all the tracking, then you did a gig here in town. You guys did one at the Carolina Theater. It was like right at the end of it. I think Miwi was still in town.
Mm-hmm. Miwi La Lupa, he played a lot of, I think he calls it a bass trumpet. It sounds like a kind of a lighter trombone in a way. But he played on a lot of the record, and he also sang backgrounds. And anyway, he's such a special dude. So he was in town, and we knew we were going to do that. We're going to have a heavy recording week and then do a concert at the end of the week. And that was so, we're all a little bit burnt and fried, but it felt really good to just like play it all live.
Yeah.
To the point that I still had lyrics on stage because some of the songs were so fresh. You know?
It was so good though. I mean, I don't forget about it, but I mean, when I look at the, obviously when I look at the title of the record, you know, and it's you and Charlie as far as like the band name, you know, and then I don't necessarily forget, but it's easier for me to just skip right over the guests that were on the record, you know, so there was Miwi, and there was Deshaun on pedal steel.
Deshaun Heckman, yep, and he played on Stranger Blues, and so he killed it. So he's on this first single as well.
And the crazy thing is too that I totally forgot about until last week was Shelby J. Do you remember Shelby coming in?
Yeah, she popped in last minute.
And she sang a line on something.
Ain't no love in the heart of the city.
Right. That's exactly right. And she
stacked all those backgrounds.
She was on 60 Minutes last week about this Prince record that's coming out.
No way.
Yeah,
cool.
And the whole interview was her and one of the producers on that Prince record. And it kind of hit me when I was talking to Charlie. I was like, wow, Shelby was actually on that record, on the record that they did. She popped in that night and did some stuff, and it went sort of, you know, it was one of those things where I get lost in the details of all the stuff. So I just but anyway, so that record will be. What is your release date for the actual record being done and out?
June 11th is the whole album being out.
Okay,
that is going to be fun, and so we're going to release. Next we'll do Stranger Blues came out, and My Level Never Dies, the second single, and then end of May will be Gloomy Sunday, which is a really different kind of song for this vibe. I've always loved this song. It's originally a Hungarian song from I think the 30s, and a lot of people have done it. Mel Torme and all sorts of people have done it, but Charlie had this cool idea for this sort of arpeggio vibe, and we just sang it. And then Miwi played a solo on it, and it's just kind of dark and crazy. And my brother directed a video for it, which you and Charlie sent in footage of Charlie playing.
Yeah. I hung up a big black screen here, a black backdrop, and I have the black backdrop is still in here in my in my side room rolled up on a big wooden rod. I figured, if I'm going to get a black backdrp, I might as well
you'll
get
use
a
that again,
massive one. Oh yeah. And so
and then
we did that.
we sent in some footage from him in Omaha in the woods playing a solo outside.
Oh, did he really?
So I haven't seen any footage yet. So I filmed this. I was staying at my brother's in New York a couple months ago, and we were in the woods, and we kind of like went walking in a swamp, and the snow had just melted, and it was like really dreary. And so we did a cool video. So I haven't seen anything yet, but I will.
You sent me a couple of pictures from where you guys were shooting,
yeah.
so just photos, and I haven't seen any of the footage but the photos. If the photos are any kind of idea or inkling of how cool the footage is going to be, it's going to be really super cool. So I'm excited about that.
Then we're going to release this You're the One That I Want.
Oh, really?
We're going to release this, and I have a couple of ideas for a video that I'm going to make. I haven't told Charlie yet, but by the time he hears this, he'll know.
Don't tell him. Just do one and put it out, and don't tell him. Don't ask for.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't ask for what is it? Don't ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. I'm going to do that. And then we'll release it in June. So
that's awesome. And I will put in the video link you will see, I will have your website. What is your website? We're not going anywhere anytime soon, but what is
LucyWoodward.com.
LucyWoodward.com. And so now that we've talked about everything that you've worked on, pre-shutdown and all this stuff, let's talk about, and this is just one question in podcasts that drives me nuts because it always leads about, okay, so tell us where you came from, but at the same time, in my world, and knowing Charlie as a player, and then, he tells me, oh, I've got this singer, Lucy Woodward. And it's like, I'm disconnected from things going on. So as opposed to feeling like you came out of nowhere, tell us where you, tell us how your career sort of originated. If you want to, you can. I'm so bad at catching up on this stuff. Like I have to play catch up on that. So
you don't have to do anything.
No. I'm just saying I'm bad about it because I'm in here. Like I said, I'm in my world and I'm working all the time in here. So I am bad about keeping up with like, oh, great, I meet this person and this is where we're at right now because I just met you today. I don't look back, it's really hard for me to go like, oh, where'd you come from? So talk about your career because you told me some things as we met about you called it like your pop career, and I was like, what? And so I want you to tell me that trajectory, as comfortable as you can and kind of how you got to the point of this record that we're talking about now.
Oh my goodness. Well, I will make it brief because I was just telling my boyfriend this the other day. I feel like only 10 years ago or so, I really started listening, like with my ears.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe in another 10 years, I'll say the same thing again. I feel like right now, I feel like I'm just listening. So so I feel like whatever music I made in my 20s, of course, it's all, or early 20s, is like all important because it's all important. It makes us who we are, but I feel like I really only started listening like 10 years ago. And then I said it again the other day. I was like, I feel like my ears just opened. So anyway, that being said, I grew up in New York City with my mom, or New York, and then New York City in my teenage years in the Bronx, and went to public high school in the Bronx. And I visited my dad in Holland my entire life because we lived in Amsterdam when I was a kid, really little. And all my summers were with my dad. So I grew up in New York and Holland my whole life. And they were both classical musicians. No pop in the house, nothing like that. It was just a lot of opera. My mother was also a belly dancer. So there was a lot of Middle Eastern music in the house.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really crazy. I just wanted her to be like, can you just be a doctor or like do something normal? This is so dumb. You have to be a stupid belly dancer. And she'd like bring my lunch to school if I forgot it at home. And she'd come like dressed in like freaking belly dance. Anyway, I mean, she's wearing clothes. She would just go to like her Friday night
that's great.
job, but she's dressed up in a wig and makeup. And I was so embarrassed. And everyone was in the class like, oh, that's your mother. She's so cool. Anyway, it was terrible, but it's kind of funny. So I grew up in a very musical household, but it wasn't anything what I do now. And I obviously did plays, and I played the flute, and I was in orchestras, and I was like a little classical nerd. And then when I was 12, I started singing. And I said, I'm 12, I'm in the 7th grade. I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It was a different, it was a strong feeling. So I guess I went to Manhattan School of Music, but dropped out because it was kind of too much jazz that they made me do. I wasn't like, I loved singing it, but I wasn't like a bebopper. And I basically hit the streets, joined cover bands, started writing songs. I started singing jingles. I started singing backup for other people. I started singing on movie soundtracks. I just became your New York session singer at a really young age, wedding bands. And I was probably like 20. And then I remember still waiting tables. And then I finally was able to like make enough where I was like, okay, I don't have to wait tables anymore. This is so cool. So that's what I always did. And then I'll just jump forward. I got my first deal in Atlantic Records, which was a big pop deal, MTV, Jay Leno, touring Japan, the whole thing.
Oh, wow. So I'm sure we can find all this.
Wear this. Yes.
I'm sure we can find all this footage on.
Well, you know what? Some of it's not. It's kind of like 2003. So some of it you won't even be able to find because there wasn't really YouTube world then. There certainly weren't socials. Yeah. But anyway, no one needs to find this stuff. It's fine.
I was just joking. I was gonna see your reaction to me saying, "Yeah, let's go dig up all that footage of your first stuff."
Listen, though, you know what? I mean, I say this as if I'm like, please make that part of my life go away. But I learned so much as a mid-20 something or early 20s, writing songs for these records, working with Abe Laboriel Jr. and Kenny Aronoff and Pino Palladino and John Shanks and all. That was my first album at Henson Studios in LA. So my world was like, I was exposed to so many amazing musicians. I learned so much just from their watching. I mean, how we
Shanks
talk about words.
Shanks is the real deal. Shanks. I mean, not that any of the other people that you didn't, but I know he's. I mean,
Shanks produced.
And he's still. Oh no, he's
rocking. Killing it. Yeah, he was. We had been writing songs for years. So then when I finally got a record deal, it was a no-brainer. He produced the bulk of the record, and then he brought in all those guys. He had a room at Henson, so that was what life was for me for a month or two. And but it was a different kind of record. I'd written a lot of the songs, some with him, some with other friends, and their songs were basically, I think for the most part, they were all finished before we got to the studio. So then it was just a matter of let's make the best, backdrop and production.
At that time, because it's really hard for me to think about time frames with like, what you would call pop music. How much of your sessions for that record and that writing and stuff that you were doing early on with that deal, how much of that was real? I mean, I say real. How much of that was actual musicians, and was there a lot of it sequenced? That was very early Pro Tools days. So
no, there were live drums on everything.
Oh yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah. I figured it was still at that point before the crossover into, hey, we can do a whole record in the box and we don't have to, So that's
we had. I mean, there was nothing programmed in the drums world. It was Kenny and Kenny Aronoff and Abe Laboriel Jr. And Denny Weston is another great drummer. He played on a couple of songs out there that I worked with another producer, Kevin Kadish, who turned into developing and writing all the songs for Meghan Trainor, all about that bass.
Oh, really?
And so, so we did a lot of writing together as well. So, but there were all drums. Maybe a couple songs had a little bit of loopy things, or maybe the drum was taken and chopped up. Maybe.
That was just, like I say, that's just my curiosity because I know that
it was early stages.
I think when I got into the when I got into the Pro Tools world as far as recording, I was pretty early on, maybe 99, 2000-ish. And it was really just another recording medium at that time. It had not gotten to the point of really doing records. So having so much of it produced in the box or anything like that. So that's just my curiosity at that level. And at that time, I would be curious. And I always, I see you on Instagram and Henson Studios, and that's like doing what I do and seeing, some of these legendary rooms and, reading about them and, interviews with other people and in magazines and things like that. And then I see my friends actually in those rooms and I like, oh, I hear you, high roller, and then you will say, hey, I'm in here all the time. I've been coming in here for years.
Well, I mean, I feel really fortunate. One of my best friends is the general manager now, and I've been recording there on and off for like, I gotta say 20 years pretty much, so, or more. So I've always brought different projects there, and I feel like, that's so cool. It's a really special room, special studio. So I put out that was a song called Dumb Girls, and I did a video on like the Back to the Future lot at Universal Studios.
Oh yeah.
Remember the Back to, like where the clock is?
Yeah.
I did a video right there. Anyway, so there was a lot of amazing things. Anyway, so that was that your first single from that deal? Yeah. Okay. And you do not need to play that song on this podcast.
I am not going to. I'm still trying to figure. I am so new to the podcast game. I'm trying to figure out the music licensing. So the only music that you hear on it now is a bumper song that I did just sitting in my little control room with guitar and stuff like that. So if anybody says, hey, whose music is that? I'm like, it's mine. You want to fight about it? So,
no, it's all. Yeah. Don't worry. That's all you need.
But I will gladly put links to those things if people want to watch them.
No thanks.
I just want to see your face about that. No. And like you said, you can't, I mean, you look back on your past and it's like, you can't, you wouldn't, like you said, you wouldn't be here if not for all that stuff.
Listen, I learned so much. And those people are all my friends still. Shanks, I was in LA a few months ago, and I always text John when I'm in town. I was like, hi, boo, I'm in town, want to see each other. And everyone's in COVID, but he's always working on a record. And he's like, yeah, come over tomorrow. I'm working on a Doobie Brothers record. So it's like, and that happened a couple of years ago. Come over, I'm working on Barbra Streisand. So, and he was the one, like he put me on Celine Dion records, and Joe Cocker was my first big background session. He wasn't there, but it was like wow, this is so cool. I was so young and on a Joe Cocker record. And that's all John Shanks. So
that's crazy.
We have a great relationship of making music together, but also him hiring me as a backup singer.
He does a lot of current country stuff too, right? Isn't he in that world also? And yes. I know that he Keith Urban Well, the crazy thing is too, where his name sort of came into my world was reading about him producing that last Van Halen record that they all did together. He either engineered, I think he co-produced it or produced it, and then seeing that, of course, reading about that in just some various articles or interviews, and then seeing all the rest of the stuff that he was doing. He wasn't just. He had, he wasn't like a classic rock producer that had been kind of slogging it out with all these guys and they just got him to do this record. I saw all the rest of the stuff. So hearing you talk about, everything that he's done, that's kind of cool. Well, and you working with him too. That's cool.
I learned so much from him. I mean, the focus and stacking background vocals and hearing inner harmonies, and it was a really different time where we were making records that we would do that. And then as I got older and I made more and more records, I loved to stack harmonies. I loved it. I still love it. And on this Charlie record, I do that maybe on two songs, like Ring My Bell and Ain't No Love in the Heart of the City.
Right.
But the last few years, I've not been stacking backgrounds. And anyway, this is just such singer dork stuff. But
no.
But back in the day, it was like, with John, it was like sing the melody, then maybe a double so you can thicken it in some places, and then sing a third and a fifth and then an octave above. And I love singing octaves underneath. And there was a whole character that I created named Doris, and she was a really low, she sang like really low. And I still love singing down there. You know, she's and I was like, awesome. That's Doris. So I actually gave Doris a credit on that. But she that was my girl. And
that's so funny. That's great.
I feel like I think I learned a lot of that from like the jingle world. It's like you have to one day you go in and can you do a Macy Gray thing, or can you do a Billie Holiday thing, or a Bjork thing? And can you come up with a character where you're all three of those people? And you know, you learn so much about color and tone and controlling it.
You said a key thing in that last sentence. You said character, and that's I know that I have done songs the same way that you're talking about, as far as for advertising or for commercials or something like that. I remember doing a song for a theme song and for there's a soccer team here that's like they would be considered like they're not like a minor league. They're like a feeder league for the Major League Soccer or whatever. They're affiliated with one of the teams, so they needed like a theme song for at their stadium. So when they scored a goal or they did whatever, they just needed a theme song. So my thing is for that, it's the same thing you're talking about with character stuff. You have to go, okay, if I'm going to make it sound like a gang of soccer hooligans and I have to do all the voices, I have to be the drunk guy, I have to be the lady, I have to be I have to be me, then I have to be a kid, then I have to be, and you stack them all up, you know, and you really have to go like, okay, I'm going to play a character here. And so, you know, that. And
it's like, that's the fun part. I mean, if you were just yourself all the time, like, who cares? Who cares? Yeah, but you're just like, when you're in a studio, no one's seeing you. It's like, it's a playground. Like your voice can be a playground. And I give a lot of workshops for singers and things. And I'm always saying like, dig into those other colors, because everybody has different colors and people want to know how to dig in. I'm like, just listen to records, and imitate. Doesn't mean you're ever going to sound like, you know, Robert Plant. Doesn't mean you're ever going to sound like, your voice isn't going to change where you're going to be unrecognizable, but you learn about how to build air in your voice, or rasp, or to control the rasp, or, you know, and that's just color. That's not even range, you know? So there's so many, it's really deep, you know, and then you got to take care of yourself, and you can hurt yourself. So it's doing it right. But sometimes it's like an athlete. I always like tell people, it's like an athlete training for a marathon. You can't just really do it overnight. You got to build up those muscles and learn how to get hurt and then pick yourself up again and do it and push yourself. And, you know, you're not going to build any muscles without a little bit of pain. I don't mean physical hurt. I mean, you got to just push a little bit. So in a healthy way, stretching, warming up, cooling down, all that. Yeah.
So I had actually seen you perform before I met you, but I didn't know that I had seen you perform before I met you, because I didn't realize who your previous boss was. And if you can tell people a bit about that was a really cool story to find out whose band you had been in, and I will let you tell people briefly about that.
Well, you just jumped ahead from that first record.
Oh, dang it.
20 years.
Dang it. Okay.
I'm going to give it to you right now. Little jump, because I cannot go from Dumb Girls to Rod Stewart.
No.
I just can't, because my life actually, I grew up in that time, you know, meaning like I actually became a singer and in that time. And so, which leads you to Rod, you know, he's a singer. He's not just an entertainer. He is a singer. So if I didn't go through the 20 years, you know, I wouldn't have ever gotten that.
And that's okay. Cover the 20 years. I totally jumped.
Oh, I'm not going to really go to 20. Well,
you can cover it. You can cover it fast though, because there's a lot of things in there. Like you said, you can't throw them away and just jump.
No, I think that I was.
I'll keep you here all day. I got plenty of time. I just don't.
I was in this pop world, and I was like, you know, got radio, the whole thing. And then it kind of went away really fast, and A&R guy gets fired, president gets fired, whatever. And I had a lot of, I'd been saving my money from royalties from the radio. So I used all that money and just put it back into my career and made a new record with my then boyfriend in our basement, put out an indie record. And through that, I got another record deal with Verve Records. And I did I was kind of finding my sound, like who I really was outside of the major label world of, the big, that was also the beginning of the end of where people made money in the music industry, like that 2003-4 period. So now was kind of the new world. Now I was on Verve. It's a jazz label. There's not a lot of money. You got to make records really fast. And so I did a record with Tony Visconti, and who did a lot of David Bowie and Thin Lizzy and Paul McCartney. And so we had a ball together. It was great, but it was very quick. Had to make this record in a few weeks and get it mixed and the whole thing. And I guess compared to Charlie's and my record, we did that record in 4 days. So I guess now,
exactly.
That's quick.
It's gone full circle. It's gone because the old records. I mean, back in the '60s, it's like they just roll a band in and cut them in 2 days, cut them and mix them in 2 days, and be done.
Exactly.
And it's kind of, anyway, continue. I don't want to cut you off.
So then my whole kind of world opened, and I realized, oh, wow, this is cool. I'm an adult now. I'm singing to adults. I'm not singing for a 14-year-old audience anymore. Now I have to treat myself like I'm an adult, and I'm an adult. I'm singing at jazz festivals. And so this is those years. And then during that time, I've been on a lot of different labels and been thrown around a lot and dropped and signed. And so it's a very different machine, and it's a very different machine then and now, and what the music industry is now. But without going down that road, that's another podcast.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
But I remember when I had just left Verve because a president had come in and taken over, and everyone got the chopping block kind of thing. I had been offered I get a call from my friend Conrad Korsch, who was Rod Stewart's bass player, and he says, "Hey, I'm in LA. I was living in LA. He goes, I'm in LA. I'm recording with Rod. We need a backup singer. Can you be here in an hour to come sing on this song?" He's like, I also want you to meet him because one of the backup singers is pregnant and she's leaving for the year, 9 months or something. Can you come and fill in? And I was like, well, let me just go sing on this record and think about that. Cause I was still an artist and I was still wanting to write songs and make records and go on tour. But in the meantime, I was kind of in between. I don't think I was quite not on Verve yet, but I was in that in-between period. And so I said to Conrad, I was like, okay, I'm on my way to the dentist right now. So can I be there in 3 hours, not 1 hour? And he was like, no, you have to come now. It's Rod Stewart. You are coming now. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'll be there in 3 hours. He's like, no, you need to come right now. So I went home, showered, went to the studio, met Rod. He was so lovely. We were working, he was working on a couple songs that day. And then I guess I got a call to kind of come audition later that week and learn some dance moves to see how well I moved and all that. And it sounds so terrible, like a dance audition, but it was really to see how well I got along with the other singer who was the section leader and the choreographer, and how well I could pick up harmonies on the spot. So they said, learn, some guys have all the luck, learn If You Want My Body and You Think I'm Sexy, that one, and maybe another song, and see how well I pick up harmonies, how well my ear adapts to the situation. So that was fun because that's all just so much fun for me to do.
Right.
So I did that gig, got the job, and I had to make some decisions in my life. Okay, I'm going to go in and take this job and be a backup singer. And I was in between deals. I was in between ideas and records. And what is my next record? I mean, I maybe I need to go make some, take a job and make some money, and then save up for that and make your next record. You know what you love to do. Right. And I was like, maybe I just need a break. I need a break from steering the bus all the time, 100%. Yeah. So it was a big thing. I and I honestly, I don't have any regrets. I mean, Rod is an amazing boss. We're still friends to this day. We talk about future collaborations together still. He always checks in on me, like, how's everything going, and how, he wants to know what life is like on the outside of the Rod Stewart world. Like, he's so sweet. And then, I stayed there for 4.5 years. I learned so much. I saw the world. The band was a family. They're still my best friends, some of them till this day. And I learned so much from him and the world of big time touring,
Right.
At the same time, I had worked with, I had gotten no, I didn't meet. I get this. I was working with Pink Martini. Do you know Pink Martini? Do you have heard of this band? I don't really need to get into it, but you can edit this out. But
no, Mike, I'm not gonna. I'll go find it.
No, there's a band. Okay,
I'll go find it.
There is a Pink Martini is a sort of mini orchestra band who, it's so layered. So I'm going to actually skip to Future Life. But
that's fine. I was going to ask you also. You were talking about that decision. You were talking about that decision at one point, and I think a lot of that happens. A lot of that happens at a certain point in people's careers, especially as a musician. If you have been billed as yourself, and this is what I do, and where do I start to not necessarily collaborate, because you'd been collaborating with people the whole time, apparently during this solo career, collaborating with writing and recording and things like that. But it seems like most everything that you're talking about previous to that was all based on your name and you as the performer and as the artist in the end, in the end thing. And so when it came time for you to make that decision, as soon as I started thinking about that as you were talking about it, how tough of a decision was it for you to go, okay, I'm gonna lose a little bit of control, and I'm gonna go work for somebody else now. And like you said, you have no regrets doing it, but how much of a decision was that? I mean, I know it was a major decision, but how long did you wrestle with that decision of whether to do that?
Wrestling, I know exactly what you mean. I didn't wrestle with it. I was just like, I'm going to I think I was offered the job over Christmas kind of holiday when nothing was going on. And I said, I'm going to give myself as long as I need to answer this. They needed to know within a month. And I think I actually let them know within 3 weeks. And I didn't wrestle with it. I was just like, I could do this and my whole world will just be changed forever.
Right.
Or I don't do this. And I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's also not about, it's at that point for me, it wasn't like I'd been on like my 4th record deal. I was like, it's not about the record deal anymore. It's about what do you have to say as an artist or a musician or as a songwriter or as a singer? What do you want to sing about? So then it was like, I don't even know what the answer is to that yet. So maybe that was my answer, was to go with Rod, make some money. And I just mean, when I mean make money, I just mean a salary. And let me just go have some outside experience of just seeing the world and experiencing life and in a whole different way, So I didn't wrestle with it, but I did give myself about 3 weeks, and then I was like, okay, I'll do it. And by the way, they did offer me the sub job for 9 months, so I was still only subbing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for a year.
Oh,
and then
okay.
At the end of that year, Rod asked me to stay on. So then I stayed longer. And that was a bigger decision. That was like, I'm having a really great time. In the meantime, I had started writing songs on the planes, like these long plane rides to Europe or something. And I was like, wait a minute, I feel percolations again of song ideas and song titles. And I feel like I'm now that life of mine as an artist is not dead in any way. I'm like, I actually have songs. So I started writing songs on the road, and I started writing my next record. And just before I had joined the Rod camp, I was working with Michael League from Snarky Puppy, who's a bass player, band leader. He is Snarky Puppy. And he was my bass player. I'd been touring, opening up for Snarky for a long time, on and off, for a couple of years.
Right.
And then, and so I had then him and my friend Henry Hay, who's the keyboard player of Fork, they produced Michael and Henry produced my next solo record. So when I knew that would, which took a few years to write and record because I was on the road with Rod,
right?
And between Henry, Mike's, and my schedule, it took a few years to make. And so when it was ready to come out, I had to tell Rod, I have to leave because I got to go do my own thing again. And it was so like, that was such a tough decision to do, but I was like, I need to do this. It's like this feeling, the decisions you make from your soul, you have to go, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to end this chapter of my life. And
right.
So I think he really respected that because he knows what it's like to be a singer trying to do their thing and an artist. And
yeah.
So that was, do you hear my boyfriend playing trombone?
I do. I think it's awesome. It's not. I just hear a little bit of it. It's not bad at all. That's awesome. It's got to be. That's why I want this podcast to be conversations, because I want it to be like whatever you're doing. I'm gonna be like, we're gonna edit that out, because it's a conversation. I mean, we're literally having a conversation just like we would be talking on the phone or talking in person with each other about this stuff, except,
Okay, as long as I think he forgot that I was on this call.
No.
As long as it's not like overpowering.
No.
Okay.
No. I can barely make it out between you talking. So
it's setting an ambiance.
It's a vibe. Well, our podcast, this episode 3 has a vibe now.
Trombone.
Due to the trombone. So, yeah.
So that was the Rod gig, and it was a big decision to leave. And then, he's come to my own shows since I left. So
has he really? That's so cool.
Love, yeah,
that's cool.
Particularly this big band show that not shows multiple. I've gone to his shows. He came to about 6 months after I left, or maybe even a year. He came to my big band show in LA, and I had like a big band show in a club that was about 120 people, and he was there with his blonde hair and just like cat calling the whole time. It was really fun.
That's awesome.
You cannot miss him in the audience. It was really fun.
And so in this talking about you doing this solo record when you were still in his band, you mentioned the guys in Snarky Puppy, and it's very cool because those guys are just it's funny because my son is 16 and there are kids that are in his class that Snarky Puppy, that's their jam at 16. And I look at it and I'm like, it's so cool because it's not like they're a pop band, but they're on this longevity trek, that they're gonna be here. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. And it's cool to see that. It's cool to hear you talk about working with them that, even that far back, as opposed to people who just know them kind of now and what they do. And I know they've been around, I know that they've been around for a while. And you guys did, you and Charlie did some touring with them in
2019. Yeah.
In Europe, right?
Yeah, we did England and was it England? Yeah, the UK and was there another country? UK and Ireland. Yeah. So we did about 10 days or so with them, maybe a couple weeks. And we did Royal Albert Hall, which was amazing. And they just won a Grammy for that live album of that night, which is
I
super
swear
cool.
When I saw the Grammy announcements, I think it was one of those things where it was one of those where it's a category that's not that's unfortunately not televised, and you have to kind of go online and look it up, to see who won best instrumental or best live, whatever. Those are categories that, there's 100 categories.
They're actually always on, but they're in the daytime. So people always think they're never on, but they're always, because we were all on the daytime watching the awards, and I've seen daytime because they've been nominated many times. So you can see it in the daytime, and there is actual daytime Grammy Awards. But you do, it's not the nighttime big, Beyonce. award festival.
Right.
You know.
So you've guested on some of their records also, like recently, or
well, they had a record called Family Dinner Volume 1, and that was their first record where they invited singers, their friends, basically, up to perform a song. So that was recorded in 2013, and I think they won their first Grammy from that 2014.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So I've been working with them, I guess, since like 2011 or 12, and then there's a song called Too Hot to Last that I sang in that concert, and I mean I sang that song for a long time, whether it's with them or my own bands, or really, really cool song. I recorded it again. I did it with them, kind of slow and kind of baritone guitar style. Really, really cool. And then I recorded it for the record that I put out on Ground Up Records, which is Michael League's label. And I did that same song with a whole backdrop of trombone horns. It was like a trombone choir, the same song, but just like trombones. Cool. So really, really, really cool. And I just knew I had this like love for horns. So a lot of that record is like heavy, heavy horns. This one that came out in 2016. And then within a couple of years, I met Charlie.
There you go. And so did you, I never did think to ask, like, I mean, again, I get caught up in all the rest of the details about stuff. So how did you and Charlie actually meet each other to work together?
Well, we actually met Ground Up Music, which is that label I was just talking about. They have a yearly festival in Miami in February. So I've performed at it a few times. Charlie performed at it once or twice. And we met at that festival a few years ago just to be like, hey, we're friends in common, what's up. And then I was in between booking agents, and somebody said, you should call Charlie because he really knows a lot about touring. So I just called him, and I was doing my own thing, and I said, hey, you don't really know me, but, can you talk to me about the touring world? And I'm just trying to break into certain markets and things like that. And he is so veteran tour guy that he has a very different perspective than me on it, but also than a lot of people, because he's just so experienced. And he's just like, okay, bye, honey. Bye, dog. I'm going to get in the car and drive myself for the next 2 months, and I'll see you when I see. And he's done that for, years, where I had done smaller pockets, and I just started coming to Europe a little bit, but I was, so I had a lot of questions for him about how it really worked, if I wanted to be even more self-independent or self-sufficient, So we talked for a while. He was so nice. And then we had, then I get this call from a mutual friend, Andy Hurwitz, who used to be at Ground Up Music. And he texted me and he said, hey, I was talking to Charlie, and he was working with this girl, Silvana Estrada from Mexico, who Charlie had been working with, her beautiful singer, writer, player.
That record is so good too.
So gorgeous. And she had tried 3 times to get her visa, to get into the US to do tours with him for the record that they did together. That she got denied like 3 times, just so insane. And that was really heartbreaking, I think, for both of them. So she was supposed to be here in time for one of their tours, and she couldn't make it in, and he had like a 3-week tour plan. So he called me last minute and just said, can you do this thing? Be here in 4 days. We'll figure out the set. And I was like, yeah, cool. I had to change a few things, and it all worked. And so we basically, for the next 4 days, went back and forth with blues tunes. He's like, you like the blues, I like the blues. Let's just go back and forth with, what we know. So we basically put that together. I flew out to New Jersey on like a Tuesday, and we had a rehearsal the next day with Keita Ogawa, who's a percussion player. And he was a percussion player in Snarky, but him and Charlie had a cool thing.
Right.
We rehearsed for a couple hours the next day, and then we drove to our gig 2 hours away in deep Jersey somewhere, and we just and that was the first of many, of like a few weeks. So that was really fun. That was so different for me. because I'd been used to touring with a big, big bands, at least a quintet, quartet, quintet. And this is the first time it was like drums, and then this guy who plays bass and guitar wrapped into one, and then me. So I learned a lot about space in that time. And Charlie always says that space is the fourth musician who you don't have to pay.
Oh,
It's like, you know what I mean?
Hallelujah. Yeah, totally. So
something like that.
So where were you at that time? And I just asked this out of my own curiosity because I don't know. Where were you at that time, right before you and Charlie started doing this stuff? Like you were talking about touring with certain bands and having a backing band and things like that. Were you still just marketed? You were booked as yourself, like solo singer with a backing band?
Yeah, I was a solo artist, and I had been working with a couple of different agents in Europe and in the US. I lived in LA. I'd moved to LA in 2009. And so I'd been working there as a singer. All my tours were out of there. And
Gotcha.
again, they were smaller tours, like me in a van driving up the West Coast, or going to the East Coast and having an East Coast band and driving up and down the East Coast, and, that kind of thing. So that's expensive.
Definitely. Yeah.
There's no money making on that. But I was like, I need to do, it's just, how do I do this? And I couldn't just like live in that world. So Charlie, he kind of taught me how to do it the right way. I just learned a lot.
Yeah.
Still, when we talk, I still learn so much from him.
Oh, I whenever I talk to any of you guys, I learn something new every time that is either from experience or from just learning something about you. But I mean, I learn a lot, talking to you guys, because that's the crazy thing. I was literally talking to a producer this morning on a session that I had early this morning, about the fact of how we have a lot of talent in my town, heavy hitter talent in my town. And it's just happened. Like I'm born and raised here. I'm 53. I went to school for 5 years in another town, but I've just been here. I haven't gone to other towns, searching for my career or anything like that. It just sort of that I have a studio, and it just sort of ended up that there's a lot of musical connections that I can make from the people that are here, that have moved here, which is crazy. And then, that reaches out to so many other people that aren't here, and so I learn a lot from those guys because from you because of the experience that you've had and where you've been and where you've toured and all that stuff. So tell me about I know I'm not going to keep you much longer at all. Tell me about your vocal stuff that you've been doing, as far as you've been doing some workshops online.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to talk about that because I know that's what you're currently doing. And I know that I've seen that you've done some one-off gigs here and there, but tell me.
Oh my God. Well, 2020 was really insane because I live in the Netherlands. So I'm in Rotterdam, and because I have a European agent, some of these borders were still open, and I was still able to play in venues and play festivals. I wasn't able to tour, but in 2020, I did have about 8 or 9 gigs in Poland or Croatia or Italy or whatever. And I did fly in masked, fly home kind of thing with my band. I have a band here. I have a trio, me plus trio. And so I was able to work, and that was very interesting because they're not normal shows. There's like 50 people, it's maximum capacity, and that sort of thing. But I also, in this year off, I went to Dutch school to learn how to speak Dutch. I know it's kind of funny. It was my first language actually, but it's a very difficult language. The grammar is through the roof hard. I'm like, it's so hard. But so I was doing that. And then I learned to record myself a little better. And so I'm learning Logic. And there are just things that, stuff to make yourself know what the heck you're doing. So I've been doing a lot of writing, and I do some writing from afar, recording myself. I've sung on a couple of soundtracks and some backgrounds for people who I love, or collaborate with, like I worked with Dante, Charlie's
Oh yeah.
artist. So we
Yeah.
have a little duet coming out actually. So I got to sing that from afar. We haven't met, but I can't wait to meet him one day. We'll
Yeah,
have a
he's
little
a good
duet.
kid. He's really
Good
good.
egg.
I call him a good kid.
So
Everybody's a kid compared to me. So
yeah, no, he's a good egg. I'll say he's a good egg.
yes,
But,
he's a good egg. So that's cool. I didn't know that you had a duet on that too. We
yeah.
actually tracked some of that stuff that is being used to loop. He's sampling, a lot of it's just sample stuff, and I think we tracked the beginnings of that in here. Charlie is playing drums and doing his thing, and I think bass and guitar and maybe some percussion, for them to be able to sample. So that's cool. I didn't know you were on that too.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm on like one of the singles, I think so. And then I've just been doing that, and I'm next, by the time this podcast comes out, I will be, let me just think about that. Well, I'll just say I'm going to make my next solo record in America. So I'll come back.
Watch out.
So by the time this podcast come out, I will be, whenever that is, I will be on my way. I don't really know the timing of it all, but I'm going to go make a solo record, which I'm not really talking about much. So forget I even brought it up.
Hey, that's okay. So you're saying we have a sneak peek, and I have classified intel as to what's happening in the Lucy Woodward world.
So basically right now I'll just put it like this. I am now making sure that I wake up and work on my own material, like an hour or two every morning, organizing my files, grooves, thoughts, song titles, everything that I've been working on all year, putting them into a folder. And I'm working with a couple of people, amazing people in America. So I'll go back in May and record an album.
Awesome. Well, so I guess that I'm looking at the clock here, and it's like, man, I am keeping you a long time.
It's 6 o'clock.
And I really do.
I have to go Oh, you know what I didn't mention, which I actually have to go do? I am doing these courses the workshops for singers. That's I'm only bringing it up because you asked. That's really, really fun.
Can they find out? Can people find out about all that at your website or the course links and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be awesome.
Yep.
So they're not all the time, so they're seasonal. But I work with not a lot, but I work with a few students for like coaching private. That's really fun because it's so personal. But I do a lot of courses through the 92nd Street Y, and so whenever there is one, anybody can just go to my website and see if there's one that I'm in the middle of now, and the next one I think is going to be July. So anyway, it's cool. It's really all levels of singers, and it's
and are fun. These like Skype, Zoom type things, or are they all in person? No,
nothing's in person.
Nothing's in person. It's all okay. Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And that can all be found at your website, which is lucywoodward.com, correct?
That is it, sir.
Awesome. And I will probably just have your website running the whole time, and this whole video thing maybe in a corner there, not to self-promote you, but hey, you gotta...
Whatever you gotta do.
That's what you gotta do. So I want to thank you for coming on today, and it's so good to see your face and to hear your voice and to talk to you.
Your hair looks great. And I've been wearing a red bandana all last week. I wore a red bandana every day, and I almost wore it today, which is so... Watch
out. Look at that right there. I still, the crazy thing is we are, I have 3 out of 4 in my family fully vaccinated both shots. My baby boy has 1 more to get, and it's crazy because when Charlie came in here last week to do his podcast, and another friend of mine I work with on a regular basis is fully vaccinated, it was so bizarre to not, we kept our 6 feet, but we didn't wear masks around each other, and it was bizarre because that was sort of like, we had come to a realization point that we're turning a corner and this thing is changing, and it's I've been diligent about it, and luckily have stayed away from it the whole time, and it's crazy because you don't realize how much that mask stays on your face when you're diligent about it, and until until you can take it off and work around somebody. And it was a really bizarre feeling, but it was kind of cool, you know? So, but anyway, I just want to thank you again so much. And everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
And I'll keep you posted with all this other music stuff coming out soon. And I'll get you those videos.
Awesome.
When they come in.
Yeah, and the videos by the time we air this podcast, everybody, the videos I should be able in the end of this YouTube video to be able to put a link to the ones that have been released at this time. Release date for the new record again is
new record. The whole album is June 11th.
June 11th, and that's on all the usual suspects, right? Spotify, Apple Music, everything like that.
The whole shenanigans.
Right on. So I will see you again hopefully soon. It's so great to see you.
I hope so too. You too. And I'll send you this audio file right now.
Awesome.
Thanks, Benji.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See? What did I tell you? Told you it was going to be a cool episode, right? Cool and super, super groovy. You know why? Because this is Conversations in Groove. Check it out on our Earthtones official YouTube channel and on all of your podcast apps. I'm Benji Johnson. I am your host, and I will be your host every week for Conversations in Groove live right here from Earthtones Recording Studio.